Happy Tuesday night, everyone. Welcome into HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We've got a few things to get to tonight, including a conversation I had with a portal prospect, a frontline guy that would make a lot of sense for Arkansas in terms of depth. So I'll briefly share some exchanges from that, really kind of get to that quickly. We're also going to talk about, what are the two biggest needs when we look at the roster as currently constructed and assuming Carter Knox returns. We've mentioned these things over and over again. So in concert with talking about this frontline piece out of the portal who I've been speaking with, we'll look at frontline depth and then the shooting aspect in the backcourt and bring up another player name that we've mentioned a bunch who's technically still available out there. So we're just going to focus on two names today. There are other ones that we could talk about, only because Arkansas really hasn't been pursuing portal players. Hey, Kevin, hope you're having a great day. Thank you. Thank you. Is that Sharkensaw? Thank you. Hope you're all having a great day as well. It's rainy here in the 501. Tuesdays and Thursdays are tougher for me to come on at a normal time. It's either really early or late. I have to go out of town quite a bit. We'll just say that it's for, my Cape and Pistol Society meetings. I have to leave and get away for those. But here we are. It's nearly 7:30 on a Tuesday night. So thanks for joining in, those who have. Then we're going to talk about, the way that we've been kind of going over the minutes for the top 10 guys, or excuse me, the top 8 guys out of the 10 that Arkansas has. And I projected that when we started recently, we're drilling down on backcourt and front court and what this roster looks like currently. And again, including Carter Knox. I didn't even have a minutes expectation for guys like Isaiah Sealy and Kareem Artal. I had all 200 minutes. 40 minutes per game, 5 players on the court at all times. That equals 200 minutes, that are going to be delivered by your roster game in and game out. Outside the top 8 guys in the rotation, I didn't even have a minutes projection for guys like Isaiah Sealy and Kareem Artal. Okay, so we're going to go back to discussing an 8-player rotation as what effectively that would be when last year you didn't recruit and sign players outside of your top 9, which were your two deep rotation, 9 players that could help you in case of emergency, foul trouble, things like foul trouble, injuries, those kind of things that we saw Arkansas have issues with dealing with all season long. So how does it make sense then to go from 9 to 8 when you were saying you were going to expand how many guys you were getting to bring back for a second roster from 9 to 11? Well, I'll help explain how that might look. We've talked a little bit about it. We're going to get into that too a little bit. And then On3 Sports continues to not only not show love to the Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball program, but in some ways it's, there's maybe a little hate element here. I don't know that for a fact, but once again, On3 Sports seems to be sleeping on the Arkansas Razorbacks in year 2 of John Calipari. We'll talk about the top 25 rankings that publication put out, just specifically the Arkansas part of it. And then another NBA mock draft update today by Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report. He's one of the top analysts out there when you talk about guys that are drilling down on the draft. He had an update today, and we'll go through the 3 Hogs who we know are going through that NBA draft process. Of course, Nelly Davis is too. That'd be a 4th, but there's no opportunity for him to return to college, whereas the other 3, in theory, all 3 do. With one of those, obviously Carter Knox, the one that seems to matter the most for Razorback fans right now. So let's jump off into it. And this is a guy I tweeted about a few weeks, maybe a week or so ago. It's all running together. Seems like a month. It probably wasn't that long ago. Rashan Agy, a 6'8", 230-pound forward, can help you as a 4-5. Played for Eric Patrick Melsman in Southern Cal last year. I've been chit-chatting a little bit with him. In fact, I put out a tweet, I mentioned that, saying this would be a perfect depth piece at your 4 spot. And I went through some of his positives. Well, he liked that tweet. He reposted that tweet, and then he started following me on X, formerly known as Twitter. So we've, engaged in a little conversation on Monday, yesterday. And so I came on, I think, 11:45 a.m. We talked a little bit later in the day, so I was saving this for today when I came on. But 3 things. Basically, I'll just give you the 3 headliners here. He's very interested in Arkansas. He has not heard from Arkansas. And he's just beginning his process of appealing to the NCAA, and we'll see if it has to go to a lawsuit. But there was a recent lawsuit with a football player when you're talking about the NCAA's rules about the 5-year clock of eligibility and how players are, need to find a way to play 4 seasons in 5 years once that clock starts in year one. Well, the NCAA also recently, not that long ago, stated that junior college years that you played at JUCO or attended JUCO don't count, not just as years, not only years played, but clock if you began in JUCO. The problem for Agy was he was at New Mexico State for 2 years, first as a redshirt in the 2019-20 season, played only 1 game the following year, 2021, and that was the year that EPM took Arkansas to his first Elite Eight, second season at Arkansas. Then he went to JUCO for a year, Agy did, and then he was at Bowling Green for a couple of years where he played 30-plus games, and this past season at Southern Cal in the Big Ten playing 30-plus games. All right, so he's only played 3 seasons, really. He had 1 game in another season. And so when you look at the fact that he was a college player during the COVID situation, so he gets a free COVID year, plus players that have medical hardships can get up to 6 years to play 4. And some guys played 5 years because of that freebie COVID year. This is a guy just seeking his 4th season of playing at the D1 level. And based on everything else, he's probably got a great shot at getting that year back. That could be a process that takes a little time. But in our little conversation, he told me he's just now really getting started on that process. He got in the portal kind of late. And I think a lot of players that are in a similar situation and were paying attention to what the NCAA was going to do in terms of this other lawsuit in which a football player won that lawsuit and is going to get an extra year to play. And it's a similar situation. There's other ones out there, but Agy's a guy that would love to hear from Arkansas. Has not heard from Arkansas, and that doesn't surprise me. Arkansas really, other than the 2 portal big men and kicking the tires on other players, has passed on everything, whether it's a splash kind of guy, guys that would provide depth, things of that nature. But here's a guy that I earmarked and thought would be great. Rashan Agy would be great to add as a depth piece. I mean, he averaged 9.4 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, an assist, just under a block per game, playing only 20 minutes last year at USC. That's a depth piece. That's the kind of guy that if you brought in, and could get him somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes, could provide depth on your front line. Shot 55.1% field goal shooting, 74.1% at the free throw line. But what I really like is he was 27 of 69 from 3. 39.1%. So you talk about areas of need. If you look at the way this roster is constructed, you need frontline depth. This guy can help you at the 4-5. If you look at his per 40-minute numbers, only playing 20 minutes last year, if you extrapolate that out, 19 points, 9 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. And oh yeah, by the way, he's not a bad 3-point shooter. He can play the 4 and give you depth at the 5 if you needed it. If you had an injury, if you go through what Arkansas went through last year on that front line, a guy like this would make sense. What is the other need for Arkansas? 3-point shooting and a guy with maybe college experience like Agy, a veteran guy. We've mentioned the name. I don't know. This will probably be the 8th or 9th time I brought up Duke Miles' name. The transfer out of Oklahoma. Played on an NCAA tournament team last year. His first year, I think it was his 4th season of Division I basketball, first year at a high major, playing in the SEC. But Duke Miles, a 6'2" guard, 190 pounds. Similar type, when you look at what he would bring to the table in terms of a role, 9.4 points, same as Agy last year, 2.5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.4 steals, 24.6 minutes. So played a few more minutes, but 51.4% overall from the field for a 6'2" guard, 40 of 93 from 3, 43% 3-point shooter. 83.1% from the free throw line. He committed to Virginia during one of these episodes where I was actually talking about him, and during that, while it was live, he committed to Virginia. He later decommitted after Virginia added another guard. He eventually committed to Texas A&M, going to be staying in the SEC, I guess. And then A&M added Ryland Griffin, the previous, former Alabama, then Kansas player back in the portal, A&M added him, and Duke Miles decommits again. Well, the latest is Duke Miles, things are heating up with Tennessee. Another team that's, already answered some big, primary role backcourt players out of the portal, but apparently is now moving in on Duke Miles. Why wouldn't Arkansas do it? Whether it's Agy or a Duke Miles, these are the kind of guys. Since yesterday's reporting, when I came on here, and it was intel from the staff, was we're not going to put out a bunch of NIL money for a major player that might be coming back out of the draft unless a Carter Knox is staying in the draft. Jameer Watkins, Exhibit A. Okay, so all right, so that answers that question. You're really not looking to go out and spend a ton of NIL money on one player when it might squeeze out other guys that you've got projected with big roles, big impact. These aren't just role player type of guys, but maybe your signature players and your centerpieces. I get that. What about the depth? What about the depth in places of need? Again, frontline and shooting. These two names I just brought up, one of them I've talked to in the last 24 hours who'd love to hear from Arkansas. They would fit that bill. All right, not a marquee guy. What about guys like this? What about guys like this? There's other players out there, and the combination of factors here: veteran college Division I players with experience, proven statistically in areas where you might need help. Proven in there. I mean, if you added those two guys, you're adding frontline and backcourt shooting from three, which is a weakness, and you're getting that frontline depth. You're not only getting depth at the 4 spot, you'd be getting depth to help you at the 5 spot in case you had what you did last year, where you got down to only 2 true bigs because you had so many injuries, dealing with Jonas Adu, and eventually even Big Z, I think, missed a game or two, and then got to a point where he wasn't playable, and you didn't have a lot of options in your 5 spot depth or your 4/5 spot depth even, because Adu Thera was out too at your 4. So AG would help answer that. Duke Miles, a veteran guard. You're relying on, when you look at guards, yeah, you've got DJ Wagner, who's a proven Division I guard, but outside of that, you got 2 freshmen. As good as I think Darius Akup's going to be, and even Malik Thomas, you still could use some experience and a proven 3-point shooter. But it then requires you to expand your roster, which they said they were going to do, right? But the minutes is going to take away, even with these guys in maybe not as feature role players, but depth players. You still would have to factor in, if you're spending NIL on them, you're not going to just get these guys who are looking for opportunities to play and just come in and bring them in to really only play as needed. You got to think these guys are looking for roles where they're not going to just be afterthoughts. They may not be starring roles, but you would still, why would you get them if you weren't going to play them and use them? And that's where I think the quandary becomes for this Arkansas, for John Calipari with this second Arkansas team is, I think in their retention, and this is where we're going to now move into the 8-player rotation part of it. I think the retention is, half of your top 8, right? 4 players, again, thinking Carter Knox is coming back. That's 59.3% of your minutes that are returning. That's the second most in Division I college basketball, behind Purdue. Purdue, in some of these way too early polls, top 5, Arkansas top 10. And it makes sense. They're the 2 big at best when you start looking at, retention of the minutes played from the previous season. And it's not chopped liver minutes either. These aren't teams that are just not very good bringing back marginal players. These are, top teams in their conferences, and arguably the 2 best conferences in the country. And on top of that, they did well in the postseason. Arkansas, again, a player or 2 away from an Elite 8. So it's a conflict. There's a conflict that we keep talking about here. How do you promise guys like Carter Knox, who I project to be around 30 minutes per game? DJ Wagner, 35 minutes per game last year. I've got him projected closer to 30. How's that going to work? How are you going to take away from him? Darius Akup Jr., who I've said all along has all league potential coming in, and the more we see him do things in the postseason, and I know a lot of these are all-star formats, but the guy's showing more and more. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. He's going to play a lot. I got a 30-minute projection for him. That's 90 minutes between those 3. I've got Trevor Brazile as my starting 4 with a chance to be an all-league kind of guy like Akup and Knox have a chance to be if he consistently does what he did in those last 9 games. 25 minutes is kind of a minimum there probably for him, but I'm just giving an average, 25 minutes. Malik Ewan, who I think also would have an all-league potential. Not saying he will get there, but he has that potential. Your transfer big man out of Florida State, 25 minutes. Yeah, so 50 plus 90 is 140 minutes. You only got 60 minutes to go around. So who are your guys bringing off the bench? Nick Pringle, let's project him around 20 minutes. Malik Thomas, a 5-star top 10 rated freshman guard who you've told is going to have a major role. I'm only projecting 20 minutes right now. Billy Richmond III, 17 and a half minutes last year, a former 5-star player. That's part of your retention, part of the group that got better and better as the season went on, part of your main guys playing in games to get you where you got to in postseason, going from 17 and a half minutes, get him to 20. So right there, just your 3 guys coming off the bench, if those are the 3 coming off the bench, each getting only 20 minutes, that takes up all 200 of your minutes. I just went through them. I just gave you really quickly 30, 30, 30, 25, 25, 20, 20, 20. That's 8 players. That's 200 minutes. So where are the minutes for Isaiah Sealy? Where are they for Kareem Artal? Let's say you added Terrion Burgess as another one of those back-end emergency pieces, 6'9" combo forward out of Benton. Let's say that happens. We've been talking about that lately. Again, it looks like a development piece more than a guy that's going to have a role in year one, a definable role in a sustainable situation where you're relying on that player to have the kind of impact in his minutes that helps you be the best you can be. I don't know that you can say that for those guys. But let's say you add a Terrion Burgess and you get back Carter Knox. That would get you to an 11 deep. And again, last year, you only had 9 guys that you would ever play. Let's say that they looked at the situation last year and say, okay, we did have injury issues, and that put us behind the 8 ball. But the truth is, by attrition, the team actually, in some ways, got better. It's not a preferred way to do it because it limits your options, and now you're only 1 or 2 more injuries away from being in real trouble. But the team actually got better by subtraction, not because, and 2 of those players they lost before you got to postseason. Obviously, Boogie Flynn before Adu Thero, but those were your 2 leading scorers and 2 best players. But somehow the team continued to perform even when they lost that. Maybe there's a notion that, hey, between our retention, the 2 big men that we got out of the portal, and the 2 5-star guards we're bringing in, less is more in terms of, do we really need to go a 9 deep? The guys are going to be expecting heavy minutes. What about an 8 deep? But we've got 3 other players outside of that get us to 11 that are playable in case of emergency, in case whether that's foul trouble or a combination of that and injuries, that we could use them enough, whereas the other guys outside the top 9 last year are guys you would never be able to use or count on. They just couldn't. Maybe they feel good enough about Sealy, Artal, and even maybe a Burgess where they feel like they're covered there. Maybe Artal, they see getting 6 to 8 minutes a game. Somehow that'll work itself out based on availability of the 3 main frontline guys. He'd give you some depth there. Maybe between he and Carter Knox playing some of his minutes as a small ball 4 gives you enough, coverage when Brazil is on the bench, whether that's foul trouble or just getting a breather or he's helping at the 5. Maybe they feel like Sealy's enough backup in case they're dealing with some issues. They're deeper in the backcourt / wings. And that includes experienced players. 3 of those 5 are guys that played last year. And then you've got, again, 2 5-star guys, but maybe they look at Sealy. So I'm not justifying that as okay. I still think, regardless if you see those final 3 pieces, and where I'm including Burgess right now, let's say that happens, I still think even if you're having to rely on them for too long stretches of playing time or for too many games, that's probably not the best answer. I still think at the end of the day, if you've got the top 8 rotation and those are your 3 emergency players, I still think if there's some way to add a perimeter shooter and or another viable spot option at the 4 spot, a player that has Division I experience, whereas Artel's an older guy, but he doesn't have college experience yet. He's played in a pro league, a decent pro league. It's the 2nd-tier league and was the 2nd-tier league in Lithuania. I think there were other players in that same league that moved on and signed with are going to play high major basketball. I know one player, I don't remember his name, is going to play at Wisconsin. All right, so there are other examples other than Artal coming from that league that are going to be at high major schools this coming season. But the point is that if you're not interested in a splash kind of guy, and you're not interested in guys like AG and Duke Miles, It was what's left. What's left out of the Division One portal, experienced college guys that wouldn't, the lower you go in terms of expectations and how much you're willing to spend on NIL, the least amount of impact you can expect those guys to have if you do have attrition. That's the point. You're either willing to step it up, pay a little more NIL, get a couple of depth pieces, and figure out the minutes. And you're probably not going to have a happy camper group. There's probably going to be some discontent in there. It just will, because you're probably not really trying to play more than 8 or 9 at the end of the day. And we just went through what that 8 really looks like and what those minutes seem like are reasonable for those guys. All right, 20 minutes in. I know I kind of rushed through some of that, but I think the thing here is the plan. I can understand it if they do try to keep it at 8. The ones they have now, again, including Carter Knox, and then let's say Sealy, Artal, and again if you add Burgess, those are your 3 extras to get you to 11, and they're more playable if you need in circumstances of absolute need. You maybe could trust, because these are all guys that are rated more highly than the extras that were brought in last year that were never going to play, effectively walk-ons. Could you envision these type of guys being more than just that and actually help you in a pinch, and maybe more than a pinch? And a guy like Artel, again, could you envision a 6 to 8 minute role for him consistently, not in the top 8 rotation, but just someone that's there to, and there may be games where he's playing 10 to 12. I mean, I don't know, but I just keep coming back to the idea of we keep getting shut down on these portal options because Arkansas is not making the contact with the ones that are even still out there. As far as we know, we haven't seen much toward that. And the ones we did see, those got shut down, whether it was top tier guys again, or the middle tier kind of transfers. And again, if you go low tier guys that nobody really wants, well, what value is that? Would you really feel good about using anyone that nobody really wants? Maybe a true mid-major ceiling kind of player that you can't get much out of at this level. The other way to look at it is international players. Here's another, could there be something in the works there that happens later? Could there be something with a Rashan Agy even later, because his process is going to take a while to get resolved? Let's not forget, in a few weeks, this month, at the end of the month, you're going to have players, your new roster, your team back, moving in, and guys coming back that are returning, coming back onto campus. Summer session 1 starts, limited practices. At some point, you're going to have your team that you have right now, your top 10. Again, we're assuming Knox comes back for now. And then maybe you add something later when things settle down a little bit and you got your players on campus and they're comfortable and they're going through the limited stuff and they're starting to see the vision. And maybe you add someone quietly later that can actually impact and play. And maybe that's why they're pumping the brakes on everything right now. It's just about timing. Don't leave that out as a possibility. I think the other thing is a guy like Mika Murinen, who I intentionally didn't talk about yesterday when I went through all the 5-star class of 2026 guys that are lining up visits, talking about coming to visit, that kind of thing. We went through all that in yesterday's episode. And I left out Mika Murinen intentionally because I knew when I'd be talking about this today, I'd circle back to him. I confirmed with the staff yesterday, they're still recruiting him. And he's the guy, a 5-star guy that's already visited. He is definitely, I say definitely, he is probably the most likely, with the people I talk to that cover this stuff and various sources, that he is probably the most likely in that 26 class at this point, the way it looks right now, to go ahead and reclass and maybe strike the kind of NIL deal that'll go ahead and make him feel good about that. Age-wise, he's already 18. It's not like he's a younger player. His class is 2026. He'd be if he moved up to 2025. But you talk about a 6'10" floor spacer and a guy that could give you depth at that 4 spot, and a guy that can, again, a good 3-point shooter relative to the position. He's a guy that would make sense. And I know Arkansas is still recruiting him. If there are any questions about that, I got that answered. And so remember, that visit was back in September, back in the fall. Things change. And Arkansas didn't get Nate Ament. And this would be a 5-star top 10 rated high school player that could maybe be on your roster, and not only be on your roster, but a guy that, may not project to the next draft and be better, give you 2 years instead of 1. So you'd have to look at that, seriously take a look at a Mika Murinen, The native of Finland. Again, top. I mentioned it. I think he's ranked fourth in the class of 2026. So a top 5 rated 5-star. I think if he moved up to 25, he'd still be viewed as a top 10 player, which is saying a lot with how deep and good that class really is. This is a loaded 25 class. He can make it more loaded if he decides to do that. And the idea here is Arkansas would potentially still be in the mix. Remember, when he did take visits in the fall, again, a lot changes, but it was Utah, Michigan, then Arkansas. And Arkansas was his favorite visit out of it. I got that from a source who got it directly from him. The words spoken from him to my source were that. And I got it fresh. I mean, right after it was stated. So that was, whatever. Take it for what it's worth. But you'd think Arkansas might have a shot there. And just real quick, leaning into this NBA draft update from Jonathan Wasserman. He had Adu Theriot going at 34 overall in today's update. That's the same spot, number 34, that Jalen Williams, Pro Hog, in the 2022 NBA draft. He went number 34. He'd already had a draft guarantee when he was working out and preparing for it from Oklahoma City. He knew that was where he was going to go. And even though he'd left the door open to come back to Arkansas, and I remember the coaching staff was reaching out to him about academic stuff and keeping his stuff in line. I already knew he wasn't coming back, but had to let that play out. But Jalen Williams went 34th, and he ended up negotiating $4 million in guaranteed money, $2 million in year one, another $2 million in year two. So he front-ended most of his money on a 4-year deal. And so that just gives you an idea of what you can garner there at the 34th pick. So let's say you do Theriot, that's where he goes. I mean, I've said all along, I mentioned it yesterday, there's talk about maybe there's a real good chance he comes back. Technically, he could come back to school. I doubt that he does. At this point, I just don't think. I mean, let's see what happens with the combine. Let's see what happens with his meetings with teams. Things can shift, but right now there's a lot of this idea, a lot of that it's maybe late first round at best, and then mid to late second round. But a 34 pick is early second, and that's not far off from being comparable to what some of the late back end first round guys are going to get contract wise, even though theirs are already you go into it knowing those are guaranteed. Most of these early second round, even to early mid 40s, those players that are going to stay in and get drafted there, they know they're going to get picked. That's under the table stuff, and they already have their guarantees worked out in terms of what the contract will look like. And usually it's at least 2 years. So it's not a mystery. Even the mock drafts don't always take into the account some of those stuff because they don't know what all these arrangements are, for a reason. Boogie Fland in this same mock was projected 40th. That's guaranteed contract money range. That's something he would be able to negotiate, Boogie Fland. So he's also entered the portal. There's talk about him. If the rumor or whatever was out there earlier about him $7 million to Florida was true, he might as well go ahead and pull back out of the draft now. Don't even wait till the deadline and go sign up for that. I just laughed when I heard that. I was shocked that anybody with a straight face put that out there. I don't think he would command anything close to half. I don't think he would get to half of that. I'll put it that way. And that's no disrespect to Boogie Fland. It's just, I just find that surprising. But a 40th pick projection is pretty damn good. I could see that going down. And that would be a reason to stay. Again, he could get guaranteed money for at least 2 years, probably a 4-year deal. You can structure them different ways. You see some odd situations pop up where players bet on themselves and take less guarantee and get to that second contract sooner. But that would be a good spot to go. Carter Knox was not included in this updated mock. And he was never a guy that anybody ever thought would come out. No, that didn't move a needle for anybody when he announced. The only needle mover that's going to be here for Carter is just really having just a big showing at the combine when you start adding up measurements, testing, the competitive part, the interviews, and then what can he get in terms of individual stuff, working out for teams, going to the around the NBA teams that invite him in for that kind of thing. And then all it takes is one to give you one of those under the table guarantees, and then you stay in if it's better than what you'd have coming back to school. The thought was here, he's probably not going to stay in unless he's going to be a first rounder. But if he was an early second rounder and the deal was good enough, I could see that being enough to persuade him. Not knowing him and what his camp thinks, not knowing that for sure, some of these early second round deals sometimes can be even more advantageous to the player than being picked late first round. It just can be. So you'd have to really worry about something like that. But we're not far out until those things play out. But based on projections now, he's nowhere near really that talking point until he moves the needle with some of that stuff. So the body of work as a freshman is not enough for people to even project him right now in these more serious mocks. I know one came out, he was 36. All right, 30 minutes in. I'm Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please hit subscribe, like, and share. We appreciate that. We hope you like the content. We're just going to leave on this note. On3 Sports put out a top 25. I guess it was earlier today. Maybe it was yesterday. I don't know. It's all running together. No Arkansas Razorbacks. No mention of Arkansas. Really? Even Jeff Goodman had Arkansas, 8th or 9th? Jeff Brazello, ESPN, had Arkansas 8th or 9th. Was flip-flop those around. John Rothstein had Arkansas 10th. CBS Sports. I think there were a couple other outfits that had Arkansas at least in the top 20 or hovering around 20th at worst. No top 25. Okay. Well, this is the same group On3 Sports that when they updated their class of 2025 rankings had neither Darius Acuff Jr. or Malik Thomas in their top 20. Didn't have them as either one as a 5-star, and neither were ranked in the top 20 prospect rankings. So I guess on the strength of that, that's enough to say, well, Arkansas, then it's not good enough to be top 25. I mean, I just mentioned the retention ratio. 59.3% of the minutes are coming back on a Sweet 16 team that was damn near an Elite 8 team. So none of those guys merit even a top 25 rank. Help you merit that? That's half your top 8 rotation right now of those retention pieces. What about the big men out of the portal? They don't move the needle at all. I'm just a little surprised by that. So, they have a right to their opinion, and maybe that's a legit opinion. It's just odd. It's odd to me that On3 Sports just kind of across the board is way off relative to what everybody else thinks. And it would be a homeristic view to say, well, that's, I cover Arkansas fans. Of course, you expect your team to get more respect. But again, most of the national folks that get it, that are respected for the work they put in on this, see Arkansas much better than that. I mean, it's not like, you got 4 or 5 outlets out there that have Arkansas ranked anywhere from 23 to 25 in their preseason rankings, yet On3 didn't have them in there. That'd be a little closer to the overall landscape. Okay, they were getting late 20 picks anyway from most of them. One outlet doesn't think they even belong in the top 25. I see that. But this is completely different. Same with the player rankings. I mean, Acuff is the top point guard in the country, period. He's a top 5 rated player. He just won a National Player of the Year award. He was a Naismith Trophy finalist for the National Player of the Year, one of only 5. He was a first-team All-American, along with the other 4 Player of the Year candidates on that Naismith Trophy first-team All-American list. Only 5 players for that. He excelled in all the postseason, 4 of them. McDonald's game, Nike Hoop Summit, the Jordan Brand Classic, followed by the Allen Iverson Classic All-American game. So Malik Thomas, to me, it's disrespectful to have him ranked outside the top 20. To me, he's a legitimate 5-star. And, there are some outlets that have him just outside the top 10, but certainly in the top 15. But when you combine everything and now these rankings, it just seems odd to me. So I can't accuse him of doing it intentionally, knowing better, but it sure seems weird. And I spent a lot of time on it. Ewan and Pringle are going to be fun to watch with our guards. Yeah, I mean, Ewan brings things to the table that Arkansas didn't have last year in its front line. I know Big Z, the idea was, he's a good passer. He could shoot threes. Some of that was true. We saw some of that pay some dividends, but he was so difficult to keep on. It was so difficult keeping him on the court, especially as you got later in the year when Jonas Adu became more and more healthy because of the defense and the lack of rebounding, lack of rebounding. Yeah, he blocked some shots. But Ewan's a guy that when you run 2-man game with him, he is I think he's a better passer. He's a better ball handler and can maneuver into situations that are advantageous. A guy like Pringle, Also on, just hard rolls to the basket, setting solid screens, and then the hard rolls and his ability to be a bowling ball around other bodies and put his stamp on a physicality part of the game. Both of those are going to bring elements that Arkansas just didn't have last year. You sacrificed, well, a 3-point threat, which was what Z was, right? You're sacrificing that. But I think you're getting a lot more. You're not as good in rim protection when you look at it numerically, statistically. All right, that's fair. But I think you're getting a lot more. I think the bigger issue for Arkansas was last year the glass work, rebounding. These are both good offensive rebounders combined. They averaged 5 offensive rebounds per game last year. And if you look at them in the last 5 or 6 years in college basketball, and you look at rebounding percentile, but I think one of them, I think it was Ewan, ranked 90th in the 90th percentile in terms of the best rebounders in college basketball spanning the last 5 or 6 seasons. And Nick Pringle is 88th percentile. So that's what you're getting. You're getting more physicality, more girth and mass and size when you look at those bodies. And you're getting, again, outside of just that, those qualities, the real tangible stuff, when you look at it statistically, is increased rebounding at both ends. And so your rebounding percentages at both ends as a team will improve and benefit from that. So, yeah, I think both of those guys. Thank you for the comment. 36 minutes in. I'm going to wrap it up here pretty quick. See if any more comments pop back up that are important. I think just the tonight we're just kind of looking at, just to recap it. What if you're going from a 9 to 8 player rotation? You could say, well, you didn't really mean what you said when you're going to add more players to have more depth in case of the issues that come up. But again, if you're counting the 3 emergency type guys, those back end guys is actually playable, whereas your extra guys weren't playable at all last year outside of the top 9. You can make an argument that less is more in the true rotation because we saw some of that play out a little bit for Arkansas as the season moved on. They actually benefited from fewer bodies. You were still in trouble again with another injury or two, could have made things disastrous. So from that standpoint, if you do it this way, you haven't really helped yourself. You also haven't answered 3-point shooting again. You're also, again, thin on that front line. I mean, that was the area where there were more injuries than anything that reared their ugly head and helped explain 14 losses. So I see both sides of it. I'm just trying to explain maybe a rationale behind something like that if it plays out that way. And again, Arkansas may just wait until they get players on campus and start getting into their stuff and start going through all that, and they end up adding 1 or 2, maybe 1 later. NIL money has been another thing that's been mentioned to me in terms of, if Carter Knox comes back, we're just not going to have the NIL or spend the NIL to go out and get one of these splash kind of guys that's going to command a big bag. So, that would be something else maybe that would have to be figured out in terms of how do you make that work. The minutes are certainly going to be tough. Yeah, someone's asking about 3-point percentage. Trevor Brazile, TB, 39% in those last 9 games on really good volume. Really good volume. He was shooting between 3.5 and 4 threes per game at that point. And he had multiple games where he was making 2 or 3 threes a game in that stretch. So on your front line, Trevor Brazile is part of that. That's your guy, the way it looks now. Carter Knox, 43.5% in the last 18 games from 3. He only played 36. I mean, that's a full season. He played all of them, but the first 18, not really good at all. The last 18, really solid. Now, it was lower volume, 20 of 46, as I remember, for those last 18 games. But it's a really good percentage. It's probably, the kind of thing where you hope that coming into year 2 that he can be somewhere between that and the 35% that he settled on for the full season at minimum. If he can get to 40%, great. If he can be 43.5% for an entire season on that volume or a little more volume, man, that's elite. It's just hard to imagine sustaining that because you're going to be playing more minutes. You're going to have a bigger role than you had even last year, which means you're going to have more opportunities. And can you maintain the really good shot selection? In a role where your usage is going to go up. It's a real challenge in year 2 how a guy like that handles that, and can he maintain efficiency at that level? That seems like a big ask. 43.5%. Hell, he did it for 18 games. Maybe he can get to 38, between 38 and 40. I'd take that in a heartbeat. You hope Malik Thomas translates that 8.4 attempts per game from distance in overtime elite last year at 38 plus percent. You'd sign up for that in a heartbeat. You hope Darius Acuff Jr. can somehow be at least a 35, if you can get him to 35%, anything better than that, 36%. I mean, if you look back at his junior season in high school, I think that season plus his final spring and summer, which was last year, he was around a 36% three-point shooter, between 36 and 37%. And then this year that fell off, and we saw the up and down in the postseason All-Star events, which again, take that with a grain of salt, but still, it gives you. I mean, when I watched him play, it was a mixed bag. But when it's three-point shooting, I talked about this in one of these episodes. His best shots, the ones he made from three, were below the break on the left side, either the baseline, deep baseline, the corner, or just below that break on the left side. That was where he had most success. And if you're playing on the ball a lot, yeah, when you get off the ball and move, you might find yourself in those spots, but you're also going to be in a lot of catch and shoot situations out high, out high. And that's where he struggled when I watched him. Not that he didn't make any out there. I'm just saying, we'll keep an eye on it. But yeah, three-point shooting, since you asked, I guess now I'm over 41 minutes. Once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. This was fun tonight. We'll see if we're back on tomorrow. We're on Terrion Burgess watch, class of 2025, 6'9" combo forward out of Benton. Let's see if he ends up a Razorback. Obviously we're going to be on pins and needles waiting to see what happens with Carter Knox and the NBA draft combine and some of these invites, individual team workouts and things like that. We're keeping an eye on all of that and other developments as we move along. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of yourself. See you soon.